Hi everyone, Gareth here. Just to let you know that if you would like to support the production of the Music Room podcast, you can just head to musicroompodcast.uk/support or click the link in the show notes. Okay, on with the show. Welcome to the Music Room. This time in the Music Room.
I guess the summary is both work and family are as intense as each other. Sort of most of the time. It's fairly sort of full on.
I play netball. I play religiously every Monday,
Yes.
and no one will stop me.
I love to go to the piano and just, improvise, but very simple melodies, like something kind of relaxing. Especially with my son, I started to write really kind of lullabies for him, so I play them for him to go to sleep. And
lovely.
it just soothes me as well.
Hello and welcome to the Music Room, a slightly different show today. This one's all about time management, and it doesn't really feature me. It's the brainchild of composer Helen Lyon, who featured as a guest on an episode of the Music Room last December. So what you're going to hear today is an honest discussion about time management, spinning those plates, balancing work and home life, or attempting to, and busting some myths that, there are very few working composers who don't face time management issues in their working weeks. Hopefully that'll help you as well as you navigate your own way. So without further ado, let's crack on. I had a natter with Helen before she led the discussion with not one, not two, but three amazing guests. Enjoy. Helen Lyon, composer and previous Music Room guest. Welcome to the Music Room.
Thank you for having me.
How are you today?
I'm all right today. I'm not bad. Sun is shining and it's a nice 10 o'clock chat with you, which is always lovely.
And slightly different to the chat you had with this episode's guests, which
Yes.
was held in the evening,
Evening.
which really ties into the theme of time management, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But Helen, you appeared on the Music Room episode all about community last year.
I did,
last December. I'll put that in the show notes, by the way, if anyone wants to listen to that. But more recently, we were chatting and I casually slipped in an invite to be a guest host. And fast forward a little bit, and you had this idea of inviting some people on to talk about what it is to be both the parent and a freelancer in this wonderful music industry. And you have children. You've certainly felt that challenge of balancing work and home life. What inspired you to kind of pitch that idea of time management for the Music Room?
I think that I feel probably on a daily basis that I'm not only pulled between my work and my family, but I'm also pulled to thinking about how little visibility and little discussion there is around it. When I look at social media as a composer and when I'm, at home and I've just dropped my kids off and maybe I'm getting my studio set up and getting ready to go and I scroll social media, the most common thing that I see is other composers being very successful, which we all know, of course, is whatever they've released that week. But there's very little discussion, I think, often about the juggle that goes on. And sometimes I feel frustrated about that because I would love people to understand there's a juggle, but I actually want it to be a positive thing to discuss the fact that actually as freelancers, and not necessarily just parents, but as freelancers, we are constantly juggling our time, whether it's our time at home, working or in a studio if we work in a studio, or whether it's because we've got to travel for a sound mix or for networking and all of the other stuff that we didn't even touch on in the podcast. But, the fact we've got to be the sole owners of our websites and our, show reels and our emails and everything else, we kind of have to be, 10% composer and 90% administrator. And I think that's also, we didn't touch on that, but that's all feeds into that discussion about how are we managing our time.
And I think reflecting on the chat, I think it's really good for listeners to hear about that, for composers, whether they're mid-career or veterans or just starting out, to see other composers having these daily struggles.
Yes.
And not the Instagram life.
Yes.
So I think it's a really good idea for an episode theme.
Yeah. And people do often ask me, because I've got children, I've had people come and say, how do you do it, and how am I possibly going to do it? How
Mm.
am I going to make it work? And of course, my answer is always, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
Sorry, am I making it work?
thought I'm very
Yay!
glad. I'm very glad it looks like I'm functioning here. But I think it's also for people who haven't started their families yet, or maybe aren't going to. But it's just
Yeah.
it's to hear that it is manageable. I hope it's a positive conversation, that it is totally manageable. But we've got tips that we have along the way. But it's just, do you know what? It's really nice to have a discussion with other parents and other composers, and all just be nodding and agreeing about the same things. That's the thing that's wonderful about it, really, isn't it? It's just sharing
Absolutely. Yeah.
those experiences, really.
Yeah. And you went out and gathered some wonderful guests for this
I
chat.
did.
Talk me through who they are and why you invited them.
Okay, so first I invited Jenny Plant. She is an award-winning singer, songwriter, and composer with a broad range of experience. Her beautiful voice can be heard on a variety of original soundtracks, including The Little Mermaid, BBC's Red Rose, and the award-winning video game Death Stranding. She frequently writes for music libraries, including BMG, Ninja Tune, and APM, and she's a member of BAFTA Connect, the Alliance of Women and Film Composers, and Mums in Music. And I chose Jenny because she's just a superb human. And I met her through Mums in Music and wanted to have her side of how it is to be both a performer and a composer on the podcast. My second guest was Ben McAvoy, who I've known for a few years, a fellow Northern composer. One of the main reasons I chose him. And I also wanted a dad on the podcast. I thought it would be important to have a dad's perspective on this as well. He's a director, music composer, and sound designer at WMP Studio, based at the brand new Tileyard North in Wakefield. He's been composing music for moving image projects for 17 years and specialises in modern cinematic compositions. He's also a dad to a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old, and husband to Ruth. And then finally, I invited Florence Sabeva, who is hailing from Belgium with Bulgarian roots. She's a London-based film composer, pianist, and songwriter. As well as scoring various short films and releasing EPs with subtle electronic textures, she's currently touring with synth pop band Heaven 17. She's also shared her musical talents as a session musician with artists such as Thompson Twins, Tom Bailey, and Glenn Matlock.
Wonderful. So, without any further ado, shall we get into the music room to find out more about how they manage their time?
Yes, please.
Here we go.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this special edition of the Music Room podcast. I have got 3 incredible guests this evening who have very kindly agreed to speak to me about time management, particularly in the kind of guise of time management when you're a freelancer, a composer, and also a parent, which we all are. I really hope that anyone listening, you don't have to be a parent, and I hope that you will find something useful, whether it's a tip about how to network more effectively, how to carve out some time for yourself, or whether you're maybe thinking about children. So hopefully our wonderful guests will give everyone some advice and maybe a chance to have let off a little bit of steam, everybody, about, it's late, recording in the evening. We've all had busy days today. So I thought, Ben, I would start with you, if that's okay. Ben McAvoy, all the way over in Wakefield. We are all parents. All of us have children of varying numbers and varying ages. I know that yours are sort of just about in school, and then I think 4 and 9, yours. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well remembered.
And thanks. And I just wondered if you could start us off by talking a little bit about your work and family setup. So I suppose take a typical week or a typical day. What are you juggling, and what is the setup in terms of your work and family? If you could just give us a brief sort of idea, and then, just to set us up.
Yeah, I guess the summary is both work and family are as intense as each other sort of most of the time. It's fairly sort of full on 24 hours a day. I mean, in terms of a typical day, my wife is a primary school teacher, so we sort of wake up fairly early, but my wife's out of the door at near on sort of 7:30 as she possibly can, depending on what's going on with the kids at that point. So I sort of typically take care of drop-offs to school or to breakfast club, depending on, again, how cooperative my children are being, basically, on that day. And then sort of, effectively head over here, usually get to the studio about 9 o'clock, 9:15 if the traffic's being good to me. And then, in essence, sort of the opposite end of the day, so we both spend the full day working. My wife doesn't have her phone on because she can't. So she kind of disappears at 7:30. And that's basically the last I hear from her till about 4:30 in the afternoon. So it's sort of fairly, if anything sort of happens at school, or there's anybody's poorly, or there's something that's happened, normally it's me that gets the phone call, which is interesting at times, but obviously happens. But yeah, we both work a full day, and my day sort of creatively is split between writing and generally sort of managing projects, and then the meetings that kind of come with that, I suppose, in terms of sort of the slightly sort of corporate branded stuff we do, or ad stuff we do. And then on the other side of the day, really, my wife sort of takes over, really. So she does pickups from after school club, and all of that kind of stuff. And usually Monday or Tuesday I work quite late, so I tend to work until about sort of 8 o'clock-ish on a Monday or Tuesday. But then on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and Saturday and Sunday, the kids have clubs pretty much every single day. So basically I go and pick up my older one from Brownies, or it's basically logistically moving children around in the evening these days, which seems to be increasingly what is happening. It's really full on. And then in the evening, by the time we've got the kids in bed, I think my wife and I probably have about half an hour of uninterrupted TV time, that's basically it. I mean, we go to bed at sort of 9:30, so it's really, because we're knackered all the time, continually tired all the time. So it's really full on. It's really full on.
Yeah. It's really interesting. That sounds so similar to me, but just kind of it's exactly the same. Really, my husband goes and disappears, and that's why I was interested to get you on as well, Ben, because there is a lot of talk, obviously, about women and having children. I think it's really interesting also to hear from you that you are doing the morning and the taking to school, and also you're the one that gets called if they're sick. I think that's a really interesting thing to hear, definitely.
Yeah, my wife has a class of 30 kids. She can't leave them. But I think, again, it's kind of interesting, because I guess it's just something we've grown up with. It's something that we've sort of, as the kids have got older, or since the kids have been born, it's always been the way it's kind of been for us. And I think we try really hard to kind of generally, I think, or subconsciously keep it quite equal.
Yeah,
I'd hope that would be the case. I'd hope that we weren't sort of, but it ebbs and flows. So, like I'm away, I'm flying to Riyadh in 2 weeks, and I won't be around for the whole week and stuff like that. So there are the odd occasions where it sort of radically changes, but I think we make quite a good team. I think that's the point. So I guess it's sort of, we come at it from a two-pronged approach.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Jenny? Because your daughter's, had the absolute joy of meeting her a few weeks ago. She is completely adorable. She's slightly younger, isn't she? Is she almost 2?
She's 2 and a bit.
Oh, she's 2 and a bit. That's right.
Yeah, actually this month 2.5. But yeah, it's what you're saying, Ben, about being a team. It's literally the most important thing. My husband he has his own company, which I guess gives an element of flexibility. But I'm obviously freelance, so yeah, we just make it work. And my day, in the morning, she goes to nursery 3 days a week currently. On a Thursday and Friday, I look after her, which is interesting in our world, because briefs come in on a Thursday, or and you're like, oh, but this is a me and all a day. We kind of, our nursery are quite flexible. Sometimes you can get last minute slots there, or we've got some other childcare and a really lovely nanny who sometimes we can call. But worst case scenario, if it's something really important, my husband's amazing at kind of stepping in last minute and being like, right, I'll do the morning. Then she luckily has a lunchtime nap at the moment, which I'm holding on to desperately. I know it's going soon, but anyway, so he for example could take the morning and then the lunchtime nap, and then so I've got from 8 till 3, and then I can take over that bit. You just kind of just make it work. Or I work evenings, that's the other thing I end up doing when I'm really busy. That's how it goes. Obviously again, freelance ebbs and flows, but on those busy patches, you just kind of, it's teamwork that's the most important thing. And I guess I'm lucky that my husband works for himself, so he can dip in and out, you know, as well, a bit easier.
Yeah. It's that thing, isn't it, of just working, like you get used to the routine of there not really always being a routine. I think it's that, isn't it? It's really interesting that you've said exactly that. My husband would just take, if it was an absolute non-negotiable and I had an ill child, he would just take half a day. Like he actually said the words, I think he said to me today, I won't actually get fired if I don't turn up to that meeting, but you might not get that job. So it's sometimes it is that, you know, and you kind of rely on the person that has the stable, you know, employment salary that won't get fired for that. That's a drastic example. What about you, Florence, and your setup? How old's your son?
He's 14 months now, so he's still very young. We're transitioning to one nap, so now I'm just talking about naps. Like this is the time where you can do some work. My situation is slightly different because I'm single parenting, so it is very challenging. My ex-partner lives in Belgium and my family as well, because I'm originally from Belgium. So the days are really more than full on. But typically now he's going 2.5 days to nursery, which are the days when he started. I was hoping to do try to get a little bit more work, but there's so many things to do, like in the house and well, everything around preparing food, anything really. So it's very challenging. The thing is, I'm working part-time. Before my son, I was doing I'm still gigging a lot. So this is more touring. So it's easier to organize, for example, because I have 2 or 3 weeks of concerts. So I can say, okay, my son is going to go to his grandparents or with his dad. So it's kind of easy to organize. But there's been gigs, like I used to do a little bit of functions that I cannot take anymore because usually it's last minute. So it's so difficult at this age. For me, I find it really difficult to also have a babysitter, and it costs so much money as well. Sometimes it's not worth it. And in terms of film music composition, arrangement, everything, I try to keep doing a bit of networking. I try to keep contacts, but it's so difficult to stay in the flow because there's so many things around to take care of. So I find this part very challenging. So the clients or the people I've been working with then and who knows me, I still have work from them. But obviously I have as well, I need to be really careful about how much work I can take because obviously my time is very limited. So it's that time management, and self-care at the moment. There's no time for that. It's just like sleep is my self-care. At least he's sleeping through the night, which is amazing. So you have to tick all the positive things.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you said that touring actually is easier in many ways because it's something you can plan
in advance,
so far ahead.
Yes.
And then that's a really interesting thing to hear, actually. I think that's probably be useful for some people maybe to think about that, because some people might think that touring would be a really challenging aspect, but you're right, it's the last minute things that are so difficult to sort, particularly if you haven't got that support network around you. You just touched on networking there, Florence, and I just wondered whether you had any more to say about networking, just for context for everybody listening. I think it's important. I mean, my opinion of what networking is anything that goes from coffee with a friend. So I went and met Jenny when I was in London, and I would class that as networking because we're two people that might at some point know someone who needs us, or we might work together, all the way through to getting a ticketed event to a film festival or going to an Ivors event or whatever it is. Networking is a really huge topic. It's massive, and this is one of the main things I wanted to talk about, because when we network, that's how we actually find our work. It's very difficult to just sit and for people to know who we are. One of the main things about being creative is we have to say to people, this is who we are. And that's one of the things I think that's difficult. You just touched on that, Flo, about sort of being visible for a few weeks or for a few months and then thinking everyone's going to forget who I am, or there'll be somebody else who's similar. And I think that's definitely a fear that I've spoken to other people about, and especially being parents where you've got other things to think about. Do you have any time for networking, Florence, or any sort of plans to do that?
I want to do more networking, like you say. You can just be the coffee, meeting up other colleagues or friends. I have found that very difficult up to now. Now is the time where I'm starting to kind of have more of a routine as well, because he's up to now I found it really challenging, because there was not one day that was the same. It's like, especially the 6 first months, you're just trying to to stay alive, I would say. So, it's challenging. I've been wanting to go to some events, but the first time, last year there was an Ivor event, but then he was sick, so I couldn't go. Then there was a babysitter problem, and then I was too tired. I was just like, not this time. So there's always, or there's something that is more important in terms of priority. So it can be really tough. I find it really tough, the networking part, but I think this has also to be like, now I'm trying to be more organized because there's more of a routine. So try to know also, like, okay, this week maybe I can try to go for a coffee and just really plan it and, look the time for that, or in advance, there's going to be a film festival, just say, okay, maybe not this, just go for a couple of hours, one of the day, something like that. So I'm thinking about more networking, but I haven't started yet, I would say.
And that's why I think it's included in time management, really. It's one of those things you have to plan for. And it's also can be really expensive. It can be extremely pricey. Jenny, I think you're a pretty good networker. I think you must go to some good stuff. What's your kind of deal with networking?
Well, I just want to quickly say the days of spontaneity have gone a bit, haven't they? You do have to plan a bit. Occasionally it can kind of work out, but yeah, I have to say my networking I do it in blasts.
Yeah.
I have to say I have just come back from LA, so I am very networked out right now.
Yeah.
And I went out there and met a lot of people. And again, actually, Florence, what you were saying about it's easier sometimes, like that was a week chunk of time that I dedicated to networking. And so from a childcare perspective, it's like easy to plan that because all I was with my husband for the week, bam, like that was done. But I did it as a big chunk there. And then, my networking, I do a bit of it. But yeah, as I said, I do it all all at once, really, is how I'd probably do it. I don't know. Because I've just been to LA, so it feels like I've done it all at once.
Yeah. So how do you find your work then, Jenny? Do people come to you with things, or do you need to go out and seek it?
Yeah, I do go out and seek it. I do. I've got a meeting tomorrow, actually, in person with a music supervising agency. I have been in touch with for ages, and I'll send out an email and say, I haven't spoken to you for a while. Let's book in a coffee. I think you can, face to face is the best thing ever. I think actually, it's the most important thing. You can send an email to someone. Yeah, that's fine. Sometimes, you can get work from that, but the value of face to face, it's so important. And also, just quickly going back to maternity leave, and when you first have a baby, you have that real chunk of time where you're away from the industry. And Florence, you were saying it's a really good point. You're not forgotten, but you kind of are, because the world moves on and people are working with who they're working with at that time. And when you come back, it's another, you're starting again, ultimately, in a way. Obviously you can keep up relationships, but it can feel a bit like that you're kind of clawing back in. I think I went off on a tangent there, but
no, I like that tangent. I was just thinking, I was having a chat with somebody not very long ago about this and about sort of female, if this is okay, Ben, to just discuss this briefly for a moment.
I'm not going to say no.
About, feel free to chip in. It's an interesting discussion about female initiatives, different schemes that the different companies are doing in order to kind of have a female-only album or a scheme for female producers or whatever it might be. And I had a really interesting discussion with someone about what was the purpose, but whether they were working, whether they're effective, and what was the reason for them. And we had a good old discussion about maternity. I had all of my children before I started working as a composer, really. which is, I think, fairly unusual. So they've always sort of just been tagged on my back, I feel like, as I've been working, and I sort of gradually they've left my knees, and now sleep in their own beds while I work, which is great. What do we think about whether there's enough being done, I suppose? Because I do feel sometimes, and I don't want this to be negative at all, but I do feel there can be a real onus on the person, on the creative, to go out and seek the work. And I suppose for people like Florence, that's still incredibly hard because you've got such a young child. Do we think those kind of initiatives are working, and do we think that there's space for more of those in the industry? I'm opening that up to anybody, really.
I know I've just spoken, but can I just really quickly say something?
Yes, do, please.
Only because it's very relevant. I'm part of an organisation called Mamas and Music, as are you, Helen. Sorry.
Yes, I am. Thanks for mentioning them.
Yeah, Mamas and Music. And at the moment, I'm actually coordinating a library album for Mamas and Music. And there's I've been doing it for the last few months with a big label, and we've got 8 tracks, and it's coming out soon, I think. It's been a massive project, but it's been great. And it's been, you know, and actually a lot of what's been lovely is collaborations between US, UK, like actually globally, to be honest. I know I've been writing with a US friend, and it's really, it's been, it's all mamas in music, and it's like a pop album, and it's great.
Yeah. And that's the other thing about networking, I think, is actually, I'm on loads of groups, and I think, I don't know about the rest of you, but I think you are, Jenny. You know, we're in different WhatsApp groups and on different Facebook groups and things, and that really is essentially networking, I think. You know, so we can do that. And I think that started probably with the pandemic, didn't it? You know, I remember when I went to my first Mums in Music meeting, just breathing out a massive sigh of relief, because it suddenly felt so lovely to have other mums in the room talking. Right, Ben, we have finally got to you.
I think it's good. That sounds amazing, Jenny. I mean, I think that it is, from a male perspective, it is probably worth sort of just mentioning that it is like, although, you know, we were talking about my wife and I trying to keep things sort of fairly similar, like in terms of responsibility, it is vastly different. I mean, let's be kind of just really frank and really honest about it. The differences are cataclysmic in terms of, you know, it's enormous. And I think also, you know, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it still feels to me very much like particularly with the music supervision, Jenny, of a really male-dominated industry. And I think that has something to do with it, in the sense that it's dominated because women go off and have kids and don't come back to the industry afterwards. But either because it's absolutely impossible to, or because they don't want to, you know, or they've just been put off or whatever. You know, if you spend 9 months out of this industry and you don't network and you don't connect because you've generated a child and you're looking after that small human being and trying to keep them alive, it's really, really hard to kind of get back in touch, you know. And I think I sort of feel like that if I don't call people in a week, you know, 9 months or 12 months is a really, really long time to kind of have your focus on something else. And I think also it's worth mentioning just the stress that then puts an already stressful career under is you know, is immense. So there are some really distinct differences between men and women. It is worth really sort of, you know, recognizing those differences. I think, though, there is also an inherent responsibility on men to change that. And I don't want to be sort of, you know, I mean, I'm not getting on a pedestal, and I do nothing about this. This is not something that sort of comes into my thinking very often at all. But I think it is a responsibility for a male-dominated industry to try and make it more accessible and easier for women, not only sort of to enter the industry in the first place, but to continue their careers after they've had kids. You know, the best music supervisors I've ever worked with are all women. They're just, you know, to be really frank, I think they're incredibly much better at it than men are in a lot of ways. Not mentioning any names, of course. But I think it's true. I think it's as much men's responsibility to sort of keep those doors open as it is to anybody else. And I think that's really the real key thing here, is that the onus is always on you. It's always your responsibility to do this, or pick up the phone, and it's your responsibility to decide that you're going to come back after having kids, or decide what you're going to do with your time. You know, that's crazy. It's like it's a really sort of isolating experience, you know, and so I think it's Yeah, I think it's really important to mention that stuff, really.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's interesting what you said about it being isolating, and I think that's one of the reasons I think hopefully talking about this kind of thing will help people, because it can feel quite isolating, and I think sometimes you can feel like you are the only person climbing up a very, very big hill. And just going back to what Jenny said before about meeting in person, and really the work that I've got, it's always been from meeting people in person, and there's other discussions that we could have on an entirely different topic, but location and all of those things come into it as well, but also the expense, and also trying to cram. When I go to London, I desperately try and cram as many meetings as I can into 2 days, because I would really want to make the most of the time I've got, because someone once said to me, if you say yes to something, what are you saying no to? And there's always that pull of, well, it's another bedtime I'm not with my children, it's another day that I'm not, on top of the washing and all of the other things that we do. And it's also the fear of saying that is actually our reality. And I think I would really love to bust that, and I'm really glad you've all, openly discussing the fact you have children, because I also think it's really important to accept that we are all professionals and we are all creative and we're all really good at our jobs, but we do also all have children. And I think that's such an important thing to talk about. I do want to talk about self-care. Now, this is an interesting part of time management. I think it's really important. I would class the odd bit of networking for me is actually self-care. There are some really nice networking, you class them as networking, but there are a few really nice things that I do that for me are self-care. I've got a local composer, Sam, who won't mind me mentioning him. He lives very near to me, and we go and have a coffee. And those sorts of networkings, I think, can be really enjoyable. Ben, if you've got any, we're going to transition into the self-care discussion, but I suppose on the way, before you tell us about your self-care routine, Ben, which I'm sure is extremely rigid and detailed, I wonder if you have any networking where you just think, oh yeah, I can't wait to go and see those people, or, where you've had an experience where maybe you got a brilliant job out of it and it was a surprise, or...
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think my relationship with networking events has definitely evolved. I think along with the kids getting older, really, I can remember networking very, very hard before the kids came along, and that felt entirely different to the way that it feels now. I think I was excited about being in London for 2 days, and kind of really excited about sort of drinks networking and kind of a hotel stay and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's sort of probably faded slightly for me now. I think I'm excited about going home again after being in London. I miss my kids the moment I get on a train, even if they've been an absolute nightmare that morning. It's like a real instant thing for me these days. I really love the little kind of networking, the little burgeoning networking thing that we've started here at Tileyard for composers. That's something that I've wanted to do for 5 years, and it's weird because I don't actually think I'm not going to get any work out of it necessarily. I mean, I may definitely get some collaborations out of it, but I don't think I'm going to get any sort of any paid work. But it's again incredible to see the effort that people go to kind of come to it. Sort of, we've only done 2 so far, so I'm saying it like we've done 100 of them, but that's really cool because it feels kind of different, and it feels kind of needed again, with the kind of isolation thing in mind. Even for me, I mean, my colleague Will literally works next door, but we're still in separate rooms most of the time, kind of staring at a computer screen or doing something kind of completely isolated. So it's really nice to kind of hang out with other writers and other composers. I try, and every networking event, I try and get myself a bit G'd up for, try and sort of really get into the zone of who's going to be there. And it's definitely getting harder though. The older I get, the more tired I get. It's definitely getting harder. Yeah, definitely.
I actually walked out of a networking the other day because I suddenly, it was like a switch went off in my head, and I just went, I'm going to leave now. I'm going to go. And I just went. And I think it's learning to read kind of I think it was the person I was speaking to. I think he was thinking, not another composer. And I just thought, I don't feel like playing this game today. And I think as I've got older and my kids are getting older and there's more responsibility, I'm maybe getting better at kind of thinking, I don't actually have to do this today. I can do it tomorrow, but today I'm not in the zone. So self-care, I think, I mean, I'm a runner. I don't make a secret of it. I'm always sticking it on my blimmin' Instagram. Just because it's the one thing I do that kind of helps me to generally diffuse work and family. It's like it does both, which is amazing. You know, have any of you got any particular self-care routines or anything that you just might be having, you know, a glass of wine, whatever it is? Has anyone managed to carve any self-care into their time management? Is what I'm asking. Flo, I'm wondering whether you actually have. I think you've alluded to the fact possibly not.
Oh, not really. But I have to say one thing, especially the first months when my son was born, what I used to do is to go for walks. So even if it was during nap time or not, we just would go out, and this was something I live near the park. So it's really easy for me to be kind of not in the woods, but yes, makes it. There is trees, there's like green space, very large. So this is something that really helped me. Just a way also to kind of empty all the thinking, like just empty the mind, things like that. Actually, the second thing, this has been more challenging, is I love to go to the piano and just, you know, improvise, but very simple melodies, like something kind of relaxing. Especially with my son, I started to write really kind of lullabies for him. So I play them for him to go to sleep. And it's just soothes me as well. So I have recorded a couple of them and I just play it on my, you know, I have a Bluetooth speaker and just play it. And it relaxes me. The writing, obviously, I don't have time just to go as much as I used to go to the piano. But the time where I can do it, I try to do it, and it's just actually helping me. So these two things, really being out in the nature and just improvising.
I love that. It's so lovely. Sitting in and nice that one of yours is actually still making music. That's your kind of way to relax. That's lovely. What about you, Jenny?
I play netball.
Yes.
I play religiously every Monday,
Yes.
and no one will stop me. As in, like,
so good.
It's like it's weird. It's one of those things where I'm like secretly competitive. Helen, I love that you run because I find running. I'm too in my head actually weirdly when I run. I mean, obviously you can listen to things, but with netball, it's like great exercise, but it's just like you're in the zone. Anyway, so
I love that.
That's my self-care on a Monday. Other times, I think just actually because life is so hectic, because also of like time management. You know, sometimes you want to work in the evenings, and I do sometimes, but I think also the self-care is to stop working in an evening and put on. Well, Rings of Power is on at the moment. You know, that's my current series. Or just like trying to go out for a drink with a friend. You know, it can be quite lonely, as obviously what we do can be quite lonely. And I think sometimes it's important to just go out and like meet people, like friends, like de-stress. Or like, time with my husband watching Rings of Power.
Yeah. I'm so important that you said that about stopping. It's just self-care it doesn't have to be an activity. It's just the thing saying to your brain, stop. Just stop now. Watch a program, have some time off. We've been watching the that Night Sleeper series. I don't know, I watched it at the BBC. Oh my goodness, so stressful. So Ben, are you a netball player? How do you run netball?
Absolutely not, Helen. Absolutely not.
I'm disappointed.
No, I know it's awful. No, it's funny. It's a really interesting topic. I wish I was. I sort of exercise is really tricky at the moment. There's so little time, and you know, I sort of promised myself when I was younger that I wouldn't ever have a desk job, and actually that's exactly what I've got. Like it sort of really only dawned on me the other day how static this job actually is. Like it's very little movement during the day, and so I sort of something that I'd love to change, but it really is sort of, it's so intense. It's, pretty much, I mean, yesterday, for example, sort of the first break I took was at 4:30 p.m.
Wow.
So it's kind of really, it's really full on. And we normally have sort of, 7 or 8 projects on at the same time. So it's stuff sort of really back to back. It's kind of crazy. And I love it that way. Like, it's not a bad thing. It's just that it's sort of, but I think the most important thing for me, I think, is remembering to take a break.
Yeah.
And it sounds really simple, but for me, I can quite happily sort of, well, not quite happily, but I can quite easily fall into the trap of just working through the day, like just just constantly sort of getting stuff done, because it always feels like there's something to do. And so I think for me, it's sort of more. It's more remembering. I think moving here to Thailand has made a big difference in the sense that we've got these really lovely big windows in the studio, which is incredibly rare. I mean, it really sort of sold this place to us, to be honest with you. And it sort of really connects us to outside. It reminds us that there is a place beyond these walls. But we're also really next door to the Hepworth Gallery here in Wakefield, which has got a really lovely garden, like a really incredible, tiny, tiny little garden, but it's just absolutely beautiful. And so I think even sort of for me, taking 10 minutes just to go and stand outside is a kind of really, really big deal, kind of a monumental thing, really. And I think the only other thing is just, and this sounds really nuts, but I think having a slightly longer commute for me has made a huge difference. So it takes me probably about 40 minutes door to door to get from where I am here to get home. And I just sort of sit, my car's like my sanctuary. I love my car. I just sort of sit in silence. I don't really listen to anything occasionally sort of put a podcast on or something, but really it's my quiet time it's my decompression time between work and between home. And I think I feel really, really lucky to be working in a studio space. It's always been something that we've worked really hard to sort of try and maintain. But it's kind of one of these weird things that I didn't really anticipate would be a benefit of moving a studio to Wakefield, of all places. It's not that far away from where I live in Leeds, but it's a beautiful little 40-minute drive in silence. There's no sort of kids putting on. What are they listening to at the moment?
Oh God, Descendants.
I know. Oh no, like my kids are into nut stuff, like Badadan by Chase and Status is like their track of the day. And it's like my 4-year-old would be like, "Can you play Badadan?" And I have no idea where she's got this track title from. So none of that happens on my commute. It's always silence.
I feel like as parents, I was brought up on Genesis and Police because we never got to choose what we listened to in the car, probably because we didn't have as much. You had to physically own the stuff, but it was Police or Genesis, and now I never get a look in. I never get to listen to what I want. It's always whatever my kids want. And I feel like I've maybe lost the battle there. I feel like I should put my foot down, but it's just not worth it. That's really interesting. I think that 40 minutes, my studio's at home. So in order to get that escape, I suppose maybe that's where I run, because I take my 40 minutes and I go and run. And then I come back and it's the same thing. It's that space and that time to think, because my studio is next to my kitchen and my kids will come in from school and say, "Can I have a snack? Can I have a whatever? I need this, that, and the other." So I think that's really interesting. And self-care doesn't have to be exercise by any stretch. It just needs to be time.
It should probably involve some form of exercise, and I'm not going to lie. I think it should. In terms of healthy living. But you probably are better off running than me sitting in my car. But it's.
It's the mental health. It's the
mental health. It absolutely
the mental
is.
Stuff is nothing.
I really think it is. So before we close this discussion, which has been absolutely fascinating, you said everything that I hoped and more. I would love you all, please, and this is what Gareth always does at the end of the podcast. I'm going to go around, please, and we'll start with you, Flo. If you could leave one item in the music room when you go, what item would you leave, and why would you leave it?
Well, yes, actually, I have my calendar with reminder on my phone. It's on my phone. So, and then I write lists as well every day, every evening. Of the things I have to do.
Amazing.
So there's the calendar I need reminder for everything. So calendar, reminder, and I put everything in the calendar, from what I'm going to do for breakfast, for lunch, And for my time of self-care, whatever, not self-care, but everything. So yeah.
Amazing. What about you, Jenny? Have you got an item?
I've just looking to my right here, my red notebook.
Yes.
I'll leave my red notebook. I have it open at all times in the day. And it's a list. It's got two sides. One's like a life side and a work side. And every day I add to it. Because you know how like life is so hectic. Like I'll suddenly be like working on a track and I'll be like, Ola's got a vaccination. I've got to, I've got to book it. I've got to, or like, I need to tell nursery about the holiday, or and it's like, back to the chords, and so, and I know that those thoughts will just go otherwise. So I write everything down because I just have to write everything down. Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah,
so that is genius. So I have separate diaries, but I am going to do a page that is. Genuinely, because my brain works just like that. I'll be working away and be like, oh my God, did I put that slip in their bag? Did I? That's exactly,
I have to write it down when that thought comes. It's got to read down.
That's amazing. What about you, Ben? What's your item?
I sort of thought it should be something more, sort of inspirational than what I'm about to say. I think it's got to be my mobile phone. It has to be. I think my relationship with my iPhone has evolved over the last 9 years. It used to be sort of a business thing, and it is still pretty much, but it's this it's constantly being in communication. I think that's the really key thing. It's the way my wife gets hold of me. It's the way school get hold of me. It's the way that, I have a sort of rotating photo in the background, which is just my kids. So every 5 minutes it changes. And so it's really become kind of like quite a fundamental part of my day, just to sort of have it with me. And it is all the work stuff as well. It's got the to-do lists and the kind of WhatsApp groups and all that kind of stuff, but it's really in every part of my life, I guess. And I don't know what I'd do without it.
I think that's a really honest answer, actually. I think that's we all rely so heavily, and I think you're absolutely right, definitely. And then the final one, this is more, I suppose, imaginative here. We're leaving a piece of advice as parents, as creatives, as freelancers. Flo, could I start with you? Do you have any pearls of wisdom or any advice that you would leave to somebody to do what we do?
I think maybe one piece of advice would be just like, give yourself the time as well to like figure it out and just organize it. Don't put too pressure on yourself, because the first months that what I was doing, I was just like, I need to work, I need to do this project. And you burn out yourself, and you want to do the long distance. So you have to make some choices at some point. What's your priority? And try to find a way to cram as many things as possible in a short amount of time. So be more efficient. But yes, don't pressure yourself.
I think that's amazing advice. I would definitely take that on. And I think that
it's difficult.
That goes for everybody always, isn't it? It's so difficult. But yeah, absolutely. Just try to not feel the pressure.
Still now, I was just like, I need to do that. It's just like, okay, now can't do everything all the time.
Yes, absolutely. What about you, Ben? What's your advice?
I think I sort of have two, if I may.
Do.
Really briefly. I think the first one is try not to feel guilty. It's pretty massive, this, but to be very brief, because I think this is a whole other topic about guilt and working in creative industries and being a parent.
That's the next podcast. Next episode.
I think on both sides of my life, like on the personal side and on the kind of parenting side, I'm always sort of in danger of feeling really guilty. Am I a good enough husband? Am I a good enough parent? Am I making the right decisions for my kids? Am I working too hard? Am I here too much in the studio? And like with work as well, it's just a constant imposter syndrome. It's always like, am I any good at what I do? So I think it's trying not to feel too guilty, I guess, in terms of both sides of the coin, really, I suppose. And then the second bit is just to set work boundaries. I always sort of joke with friends that if I wasn't married and didn't have kids, that I'd be a workaholic. But I genuinely actually think that would be true. I think I would find myself in the studio until 11 p.m. most days. And so I think strangely what's happened since having kids is it's kind of forced me to set those work boundaries in a really radically different way to what I was used to before. My kids are they're sort of fairly interested in music, but they do not care what I do. They're just not bothered about the projects that I work on. I mean, it's just not interesting to them at all. Even for my 9-year-old, I thought I'd kind of reached the point where I was a cool dad. She doesn't care. She's just not bothered. She's not fazed at all. She just wants me to kind of be at home. And I think that that's the really bizarre thing about this industry, is that it consumes as much as you give it. And I think that, again, linked to the not feeling guilty thing, I love being a dad. Like, I'm proud of being a dad. That's the most important part of my whole life. It used to be that music was my baby, and then there were babies, and so it sort of weirdly shifts your whole perspective on life, doesn't it? And I think that setting those work boundaries is massively important to me, because it otherwise it just consumes absolutely everything I've got to give it. That's my advice.
And you're so right, it does. It's one of those things that it will just, you give more and it'll just ask for more. And I think because there's always more, there's always someone else doing something that you think you should be doing, and why haven't you done that yet? Because our network's so vast, isn't it, in terms of people. So easy to just think, oh, I really should be doing that other thing that person's doing, because then it'll lead to that thing, and then I should do. I think that they're both excellent. I'm glad you've left both of those. We'll keep both of those. And then Jenny, we're going to finish on you.
All great points. And, in a way similar to what Florence was saying, I think my piece of advice is to surrender to the chaos. Basically. So many times, I'll be completely honest, like, I get a call from nursery, Orla's got a temperature, she's got to come home, and I'm like, no, like, this is not how today is supposed to be. But then you're like, but she's number one. Like, at the end of the day, like, forget, like, if you really have to call up someone and say, I'm really sorry, but I need an extra day on this deadline, you've got to surrender to that. And I think before, we can put so much pressure on ourselves to get things done and be right, but we're parents, the kid's number one. If Orla's got to take that day off nursery, that's the situation. And I think it's just surrendering to the chaos on so many levels.
An admission that it is chaos.
Admission
that it is total chaos, and then surrender to it, and then every day is different, and we just have to absolutely roll with it. Thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed the conversation. I think we've gone on for much longer than we were meant to, but I don't care, because I feel like we talked about so many wonderful things. Thank you so much for giving your evening. Thank you. I really hope that people will listen to this and definitely take something away from it, and maybe, find that they feel very, very similar in many cases. So thank you so much to all three of you. And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Music Room podcast today. If you'd like to know more about the show or the community that surrounds it, head to musicroom.community. The link is in the show notes. Like the sound of this episode? The Sound Boutique can help with your show too, from fixing problem audio all the way through to producing full shows. Visit thesoundboutique.com today to start a conversation. The link is in the show notes.